What happens when Hollywood royalty meets late-night television's sharpest wit, and the conversation takes a devastating turn that nobody saw coming? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Stephen Colbert for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview, only to have it spiral into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. The Duchess who once charmed America found herself in the hot seat facing questions she clearly wasn't prepared to answer, and her reactions shocked viewers across the nation. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when two of the most polarizing figures in entertainment clash in ways that will have social media buzzing for weeks. The Ed Sullivan Theater fell unusually quiet as Meghan Markle stepped onto the familiar stage, her trademark confident smile beaming under the bright studio lights. Dressed in an elegant navy blazer that screamed expensive, she waved to the audience with practiced royal precision. But something felt different tonight. The usually warm late-show crowd seemed reserved, their applause polite but lacking the enthusiasm typically reserved for A-list guests. Stephen Colbert rose from behind his desk, extending his hand with his characteristic grin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle." The audience clapped dutifully as she settled into the guest chair, crossing her legs and arranging herself with the poise of someone who'd done this dance countless times before. "Meghan, welcome back to the show," Colbert began, his tone warm but with an edge that regular viewers might have recognized as his setup mode. "It's been quite a journey since we last spoke. You've been busy with your various projects, your podcast, your Netflix deal. How's life treating you?" Meghan's smile never wavered, but those paying close attention might have noticed a slight tightening around her eyes. "Oh, Stephen, it's been incredible. Harry and I are just so grateful for all the opportunities we've been given to share our story and really make a difference in the world. We're focused on building something meaningful, something that can create real change." "Real change," Colbert repeated, nodding slowly. "That's interesting, because I've been following some of the recent developments, and I have to ask about the criticism you've been facing lately. There seems to be a growing narrative that perhaps some of your charitable endeavors haven't quite delivered the impact that was promised. The Archwell Foundation, for instance, has faced some scrutiny over its financial transparency." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Meghan's smile flickered for just a moment before returning full force, but her voice carried a new edge. "Stephen, I think that's incredibly unfair. Harry and I have been nothing but transparent about our work. We're trying to do good in the world, and it's disappointing that instead of celebrating that, some people choose to tear us down." Colbert leaned back in his chair, his expression remaining friendly but his journalist instincts clearly engaged. "I'm not trying to tear anyone down, Meghan. I'm just asking about the numbers. Your foundation raised millions, but the actual charitable giving seems to be, well, significantly less than what people might expect. Can you help us understand where that money is going?" The audience, sensing the shift in atmosphere, had gone completely silent. Meghan's composure began to show hairline cracks as she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I think you're mischaracterizing our work entirely. We're building sustainable programs, Stephen. Real change doesn't happen overnight, and it requires investment in infrastructure, in people, in systems that can create lasting impact." "Fair enough," Colbert said, his tone remaining measured but his eyes sharp. "But help me understand this. You and Harry left the royal family citing a desire for privacy and independence, yet you've signed lucrative deals with Netflix and Spotify. You're constantly in the media, and you're sharing the most intimate details of your personal life. How do you reconcile that apparent contradiction?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's carefully constructed media persona began to show signs of strain as she processed what was clearly not the softball interview she had expected. Her laugh came out slightly forced, and when she spoke, There was a defensive quality that hadn't been there moments before. I think that's a very reductive way of looking at our situation, Stephen. We never said we wanted complete privacy. We said we wanted the freedom to tell our own story, to control our own narrative, and to use our platform for good. There's a big difference between being exploited by the media and choosing to share your truth on your own terms. But Colbert wasn't backing down, and the studio audience could feel the tension building like electricity in the air, setting the stage for what would become an unforgettable confrontation that would dominate headlines and social media feeds for days to come. Colbert pressed forward, his journalistic instincts fully activated now. Speaking of controlling your own narrative, let's talk about some of the claims you've made. You've spoken extensively about your experiences with the royal family, particularly around issues of racism and mental health support. But several former palace staff members have come forward with different accounts of events. How do you respond to those who say your version of events doesn't align with their recollections? Meghan's eyes flashed with something that looked dangerously close to anger. Her voice rose slightly, the carefully modulated tone beginning to crack. Stephen, I find it really troubling that you're giving credence to anonymous sources and palace spin over my lived experience. I was there. I lived through it. And frankly, it's exactly this kind of questioning that shows why Harry and I had to leave in the first place. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the polite, superficial celebrity chat they had expected. Colbert, however, seemed energized by the pushback, leaning forward slightly as he continued his line of questioning. I'm not trying to invalidate your experience, Meghan, but journalism requires examining all sides of a story. And speaking of stories, there have been some questions raised about your pre-royal career claims, some inconsistencies in timelines, job descriptions, even educational background. The public has a right to accurate information, don't they? Meghan's composure was visibly deteriorating now. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair, and her voice took on a sharp edge that cut through the studio's tense atmosphere. I cannot believe you're sitting here, on national television, essentially calling me a liar. This is exactly the kind of harassment and character assassination that drove us out of the UK, and now it's happening here too. I'm not calling you anything, Colbert replied calmly, his professional demeanor intact even as the interview spiraled into uncomfortable territory. I'm asking questions that many Americans are asking. You've positioned yourself as a truth-teller, someone who speaks authentically about difficult subjects. But when the details of your own story come under scrutiny, you seem to take it very personally. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward with the force of her movement. The studio audience gasped collectively, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Her voice rose to a level that bordered on shouting, all pretense of royal composure abandoned. This is absolutely unacceptable. I came here in good faith to talk about my charitable work and my family, and instead you're ambushing me with tabloid conspiracy theories and hit pieces. Harry was right about the American media being just as toxic as the British press. Colbert remained seated, his expression serious but calm. Meghan, please sit down. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are legitimate questions based on documented inconsistencies. If you can't address them, that's fine, but attacking the messenger isn't going to make them go away. The Duchess's face was flushed now, her breathing clearly elevated as she pointed an accusatory finger at the host. You want to talk about documented inconsistencies? Let's talk about how you've completely abandoned any pretense of journalistic integrity for the sake of ratings. This is a hit job, pure and simple, and I won't stand for it. The studio had fallen into an almost eerie silence, with even the production crew seeming frozen as they witnessed what was clearly an unprecedented meltdown. Colbert's voice remained steady, but there was steel in it now as he responded to her accusations. Meghan, I've been doing this job for decades, and I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and celebrities from every walk of life. I ask tough questions because that's what journalism requires. If you're not prepared to answer them, perhaps you shouldn't be making public appearances to promote your various projects. What happened next would become the moment that defined not just this interview, but Meghan Markle's entire relationship with American media, as her response crossed a line that even her most ardent supporters would find difficult to defend. Meghan's voice turned ice-cold as she looked directly into the camera, completely bypassing Colbert as if he no longer existed. "You know what, America? This is exactly why authentic voices get silenced. This is exactly why people like me, people who dare to speak truth to power, get torn down by establishment media figures who are more interested in protecting their old boys club than actually listening to marginalized voices." The studio audience was stunned into complete silence. Even Colbert seemed momentarily taken aback by her decision to address the camera directly, effectively hijacking his show. But Meghan wasn't finished. "Stephen, you sit there in your comfortable chair with your comfortable life, having never faced a single day of the kind of systemic racism and institutional gaslighting that I've endured. Yet you have the audacity to question my lived experience, to suggest that I'm somehow lying about the trauma I've survived?" Colbert's jaw tightened visibly. His professional composure was being tested in ways he'd never experienced, even during his most contentious political interviews. "Meghan, that's not what I said, and you know it. I never questioned your experience with racism. I asked about factual inconsistencies in your public statements, which is entirely different." "Oh, so now you're telling me what I know," Meghan shot back, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is rich. A middle-aged white man explaining to a biracial woman what constitutes racism and what doesn't. The audacity is breathtaking. Stephen, truly breathtaking." The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Colbert's eyes flashed with anger for the first time in the interview. "Don't you dare turn this into something it's not. I've spent my entire career fighting for progressive causes and giving voice to the voiceless. You don't get to lecture me about social justice because you're uncomfortable answering legitimate questions about your public statements." Meghan laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the silent studio. "Fighting for progressive causes? Is that what you call this ambush? You invited me here under false pretenses, Stephen. You told my team this would be a friendly conversation about my charitable work, and instead you've turned it into some sort of trial where I'm expected to defend every word I've ever spoken to a hostile prosecutor. I'm a talk show host asking questions that millions of Americans want answered," Colbert replied, his voice rising for the first time. "If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, then maybe you shouldn't be positioning yourself as a public figure who speaks on behalf of causes and communities." Meghan's response was swift and venomous. "Oh, I see what this is really about now. You can't stand that a woman, a black woman, has found success and influence without going through the traditional gatekeepers like you. You're threatened by the fact that I don't need your approval or your platform to reach people and make a difference." The accusation hung in the air like a poison cloud. Colbert's face had gone completely stone cold, his legendary composure finally cracking under the weight of what he clearly saw as a deeply unfair and inflammatory attack. "That is completely out of line," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "I have interviewed countless women of color with nothing but respect and professionalism. You're making accusations that are not only false, but deeply offensive to anyone who knows my record or my character." Meghan stepped closer to his desk, her body language now openly aggressive. "Your record? Let's talk about your record, Stephen. How many times have you given platform to voices that challenge the establishment? How often do you really push back against power structures? Or do you just play the friendly court jester for the people who sign your paychecks?" The studio audience was witnessing something unprecedented in late-night television history. This had moved far beyond a difficult interview into personal attacks that were making everyone in the room deeply uncomfortable. Colbert stood up slowly, his full height making him tower over the Duchess. "I think this interview is over," he said firmly, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. But Meghan wasn't ready to back down, and what she said next would seal her fate and create a media firestorm that would burn for weeks. "Oh, you think this interview is over?" Meghan's voice carried a mocking tone that sent chills through the studio. "How convenient. The moment things get uncomfortable for you, the moment someone actually challenges your authority, you want to shut it down. That's exactly the kind of privileged response I expected from someone in your position." Colbert's face had turned a dangerous shade of red, his legendary self-control hanging by a thread. "Meghan, you need to stop, right now. You're making accusations that are completely baseless and, frankly, slanderous." "Slanderous?" Meghan laughed again, that same bitter sound that had become her signature throughout this disastrous interview. "Is that a threat, Stephen? Are you going to sue me for telling the truth about what this really is? Because I think your viewers deserve to know that this whole thing was a setup from the beginning." The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with several people shifting in their seats and looking toward the exits. The energy in the room had become toxic, and everyone could feel it. But Meghan pressed on, seemingly oblivious to how badly she was coming across. "You know what the real problem is here? You can't stand that I don't need you. I don't need your show. I don't need your approval. And I certainly don't need to sit here and be lectured by someone who has never faced real adversity in his entire privileged life." Colbert's voice dropped to a whisper, but every word carried the weight of barely contained fury. "I have faced adversity, Meghan. I lost my father and 2 brothers in a plane crash when I was 10 years old. I've battled depression and anxiety my entire adult life. Don't you dare tell me I don't know about adversity." For the first time since the confrontation began, Meghan seemed momentarily stunned. The revelation had clearly caught her off guard, and for a brief moment, her mask of righteous indignation slipped. But instead of backing down or apologizing, she doubled down in the most devastating way possible. "That's tragic, Stephen. It really is. But personal tragedy doesn't excuse perpetuating systemic oppression. It doesn't give you the right to weaponize your platform against people who are trying to make real change in the world." The studio had gone completely silent except for the hum of the cameras. Even the production crew seemed frozen in place, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. Colbert's hands were visibly shaking with rage as he struggled to maintain any semblance of professionalism. "Get out," he said quietly, his voice barely audible but carrying absolute authority. "Get out of my studio right now." Meghan's eyes blazed with defiance. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. This interview is over. Your behavior is completely unacceptable, and I will not allow you to turn my show into a platform for your personal attacks and conspiracy theories. Security will escort you out if necessary." The Duchess took a step back, but her defiance only seemed to grow stronger. "You're going to have me thrown out? On national television? Do you have any idea what kind of optics that creates? A white, male host having a black woman forcibly removed from his show?" Colbert's response was swift and decisive. "Your race and gender have nothing to do with this, and you know it. Your behavior does. I've had difficult guests before. I've had contentious interviews, but I have never had someone come on my show and make personal attacks while refusing to engage with legitimate questions." "Legitimate questions?" Meghan's voice rose to near shouting levels again. "You call that character assassination legitimate? You call that ambush journalism? This is exactly what drove Harry and me out of Britain, and now you're doing the same thing here." The mention of Prince Harry seemed to trigger something in Colbert, and his next words cut through the studio like a knife. "Leave Harry out of this. He's not here to defend himself against whatever narrative you're trying to spin. This is about you, your behavior, and your complete inability to handle any form of accountability." What happened next would become the most replayed moment of the entire confrontation, as Meghan's final response before her dramatic exit would cement her reputation as someone who couldn't handle criticism and would go to any lengths to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. Meghan's face contorted with rage as she pointed directly at Colbert, her voice reaching a crescendo that would echo through social media for days. "You know what, Stephen? History will remember this moment. History will remember how you treated a woman who dared to speak her truth, who dared to challenge the narrative that comfortable people like you want to maintain. And when people look back at this, they'll see exactly what kind of person you really are." Colbert stood firm, his voice steady despite the chaos. "History will remember that I asked you legitimate questions, and you responded with personal attacks, conspiracy theories, and attempts to manipulate the conversation through false accusations. That's what history will remember." "False accusations?" Meghan shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "Everything I've said tonight has been absolutely true, and the fact that you can't handle it proves every single point I've made about the establishment media and their protection of the status quo." The Duchess began gathering her purse and coat with jerky, agitated movements, her hands visibly shaking with fury. "You think you've won something here tonight, Stephen? You think this little performance makes you look good? Well, I have news for you. My audience, my millions of followers, they're going to hear about this. They're going to know exactly what happened here and how I was treated." Colbert's response was calm but firm. "I welcome that scrutiny, Meghan. Unlike some people, I stand behind my actions and my words. The tape speaks for itself." As Meghan stormed toward the stage exit, she turned back one final time, her voice carrying across the stunned studio. "This isn't over, Stephen. People need to know the truth about what really happens when you challenge the comfortable lies that people like you built your careers on. The truth will come out." "The truth already came out," Colbert replied quietly. "It came out in your response to simple questions. It came out in your inability to address legitimate concerns. And it came out in your decision to attack me personally rather than defend your actions professionally." Meghan disappeared through the stage door with a thunderous slam that reverberated through the silent studio. For several long moments, nobody moved. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or simply sit in the uncomfortable aftermath of what they had just witnessed. Colbert slowly returned to his desk, straightening his tie and taking a deep breath before looking directly into the camera. "Well, folks, that happened. I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've never experienced anything quite like what you just saw. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll try to get back to what this show is really about." As the cameras cut away, the studio erupted in whispered conversations and shocked murmurs. Production assistants scrambled to manage the fallout, while Colbert's team huddled around him, clearly shaken by what had just transpired. Within hours, clips of the confrontation had exploded across social media platforms. Twitter was ablaze with reactions ranging from shock and outrage to support for Colbert's handling of the situation. The hashtag #MeghanMeltdown began trending worldwide, while the Colbert ambush gained traction among Meghan's defenders, though they were significantly outnumbered. Media analysts and royal experts were called in for emergency commentary on news networks across the country. The consensus was clear. Meghan had severely damaged her public image through her inability to handle legitimate questioning and her resort to personal attacks and racial accusations when confronted with uncomfortable truths. The incident sparked broader conversations about celebrity accountability, media responsibility, and the difference between asking tough questions and actual harassment. Public opinion polls showed a dramatic shift in Meghan's favorability ratings, with many Americans expressing disappointment in her behavior and questioning her credibility on the issues she claimed to champion. The confrontation highlighted the importance of respect and professionalism in public discourse, serving as a stark reminder that public figures who seek to influence important conversations must be prepared to defend their positions with facts and grace rather than personal attacks and deflection. The Duchess who once charmed America had revealed a side of herself that many found deeply troubling, and her reputation may never fully recover from this self-inflicted wound.